They said she was cursed. They said she brought death to any man who looked at her. They said her own father begged the town to take her away before she ruined them all. That was why they dragged her into the center of Laramie, Wyoming, with a rough sack pulled over her head and rope around her wrists like she was a stray animal. The men laughed. The women turned their backs. The preacher did not say a word. But Elias Boon did not laugh. He stood at the edge of the crowd, tall and silent, his broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy buffalo coat, dusted with snow. He had come down from the Bighorn Mountains only to trade pelts and buy flour before winter sealed the passes. He did not come for a bride. Yet there she was. The auction block was nothing more than an old wagon turned sideways in the mud, and a thin man named Clyde Mercer stood on it, waving a paper in his hand like he was selling fine cattle. "Strong back," Clyde shouted. "Young, no sickness, just unfortunate in the face." The crowd chuckled. The girl did not move. Even with the sack covering her head, Elias could see something strange about her posture. She was not bent in shame. She stood straight. Her chin was high beneath the cloth. "How much?" someone called. $10, Clyde barked. $10 and she's yours. You won't have to look at her. Keep the sack on if you want. A drunk ranch hand staggered forward. $5. $7, another man said. "I need someone to scrub floors." They spoke about her like she was not even there. Elias felt something twist in his chest. He had seen men die in the war. He had seen widows starve. But this felt worse. This felt wrong. He stepped forward. 20. The number cut through the noise like a rifle shot. The crowd turned. Clyde's eyes widened. 20! Boon, you sure? You ain't even seen her. "I'm buying her work," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "Not her face." The girl's hands tightened at her sides when he spoke. 30, Elias added, before anyone else could answer. No one topped it. Clyde grinned and grabbed the leather pouch Elias tossed onto the wagon. The coins clinked heavy. "Sold. She's yours, mountain man. Don't come crying when you see what's under that sack." Elias climbed onto the wagon. He untied the rope from the iron ring. He did not remove the sack. Not yet. "Walk," he said quietly. She stepped down beside him. They left town under a sky the color of steel. No one tried to stop them. The trail toward the Bighorns was long and empty. Elias had 2 horses. He mounted his chestnut stallion and tied the lead rope of the second horse to his saddle. He helped the girl onto it. She moved carefully but did not tremble. They rode for hours in silence. The snow deepened as they climbed. The air grew sharper. The town disappeared behind them like a bad dream. "You can take it off," Elias said at last, without looking back. "No one's watching." She did not answer. After a moment, she reached up and loosened the rope around her neck. But instead of removing the sack, she only lifted it slightly so she could see the path ahead. Her face remained hidden. Elias frowned but said nothing. By nightfall, they reached his cabin. It stood against a wall of dark pine trees near a frozen creek. Smoke rose thin from the chimney. Yes, the place was rough but sturdy, built with his own hands. He dismounted and helped her down. Inside, the cabin was warm. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. The scent of pine filled the air. He closed the door behind them. "Take it off," he said. The girl stood in the center of the room. The firelight flickered against the burlap cloth. For a long moment, she did not move. "I won't scream," Elias added, "and I won't send you back." Her hands trembled slightly as they rose to the sack. She pulled it up and over her head. Elias expected burns. He expected twisted flesh or something terrible. Instead, he gasped. She was beautiful. Not in the soft, fragile way of city ladies. She had sharp features and strong bones. Her skin was pale against long, dark hair that fell to her shoulders. But it was her eyes that froze him in place. One eye was bright green. The other was deep gray like a storm. There was a scar along her cheek, thin but long, as if someone had cut her on purpose. She stared at him, waiting for disgust. "Well," she said, her voice steady. "Do I look cursed?" Elias stepped closer. He studied the scar. It was not an accident. It was a mark made with anger. "Who did that?" he asked quietly. "My husband," she said. The word hung heavy in the air. "I ran," she continued. "He caught me. He said no man would ever want me again, so he made sure of it." Elias's jaw tightened. "He told the town I was mad, that I tried to poison him. They believed him. And the sack? He said my face scared him." Elias felt heat rise in his chest. Not fear, not shame. Rage. "What's his name?" he asked. "Caleb Turner." Elias knew it. Turner owned half the cattle in the valley below Laramie. A powerful man, the kind who thought money made him untouchable. "He won't come up here," Elias said. "He will," she replied. "He doesn't let things go." Elias studied her again. "What's your name?" "Rebecca Hale." He nodded. "You can have the loft. I'll sleep down here." She blinked, surprised. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "I've seen worse than scars," he said, "and I don't believe in curses." The next days were quiet. Rebecca worked without being asked. She cleaned the cabin. She cooked with skill that surprised him. She mended his torn coat. She moved like someone raised in a proper house, not a farm. One afternoon, he returned from checking traps to find her sitting by the window, reading from an old Bible he kept on a shelf. "You can read?" he asked. She looked up. "My father was a schoolteacher." Elias sat across from her. "Why did you marry him?" he asked gently. Her hands tightened around the book. "I didn't have a choice." Snow began to fall harder that week. The mountains grew silent. On the 6th night, Elias stepped outside to bring in firewood. He stopped. Tracks. Fresh ones. Horse tracks. 3 sets. They circled the cabin and led back toward the valley. Elias's stomach went cold. He walked back inside slowly. "Pack what you need," he said. Rebecca looked at him, fear flashing in her mismatched eyes. "He found us." Elias grabbed his rifle from above the door. "Not yet," he said, "but he's close." Outside, a branch snapped. Then came the sound of hooves crunching through snow. A voice called from the dark. "Rebecca!" She went pale. Caleb Turner's voice carried through the trees like a snake's hiss. "Come home," he shouted. "You don't belong with that animal." Elias stepped in front of her. "You stay behind me," he said. The door rattled as someone slammed against it. "Open up, Boon," Caleb called, "or we burn you out." Rebecca's breathing quickened. Elias looked at her. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. She nodded once. He handed her a spare rifle. The first shot shattered the cabin window. Wood splintered. Smoke and cold air rushed inside. Elias fired back through the door. A man screamed. Rebecca moved to the side wall and aimed toward the shadows near the stable. Another shot rang out. More shouting. Caleb's voice roared in anger. "You think you can keep what's mine?" Rebecca's eyes hardened. "I was never yours," she whispered. Elias glanced at her and saw something fierce rise in her expression. Not fear, not shame. Strength. The door cracked under another heavy blow. Elias reloaded. "They'll try the back," he said. Rebecca ran to the rear window. She steadied her rifle and waited. The latch began to move slowly. Without hesitation, she fired through the wood. A body fell. Silence followed. For a brief second, the snow outside swallowed all sound. Then, Caleb shouted from somewhere near the tree line. "This isn't over!" Elias stepped to the broken window. Through the blowing snow, he saw a figure retreating on horseback. Caleb Turner was not dead. He was retreating. But the look he gave the cabin before vanishing into the storm promised something worse than tonight. Elias shut the door and barred it tight. Rebecca stood shaking now, the rifle still in her hands. He walked to her and gently lowered it. "You did good," he said. She looked at him, tears finally breaking free. "He won't stop." Elias stared into the storm outside. "Then neither will we." The wind howled against the cabin walls. Winter had only just begun. The storm lasted 3 days. Snow buried the cabin halfway to the windows. The world outside turned white and silent. But Elias knew silence in the mountains never meant safety. It meant waiting. Rebecca moved through the cabin with purpose. She did not speak much after the attack. She chopped vegetables with sharp, quick strokes. She kept the fire alive. She cleaned the rifles and laid them side by side on the table. On the second night, Elias woke to the sound of her crying softly in the loft. He sat up on his cot near the door. "Rebecca," he called gently. The crying stopped. After a moment, she climbed down the ladder. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. The scar on her cheek caught the firelight. "I dreamed he found me again," she said. "Only this time, no one was there to help." Elias stood. He walked to the hearth and added a log. "He's flesh and blood," Elias said. "Not a ghost. And flesh and blood can bleed." Rebecca studied him. You talk like a soldier." "I was," he answered. "Union cavalry. I learned something in the war." "What?" "That fear is loud before a fight. But after the first shot it goes quiet. Then it's just action." She nodded slowly. "You're not afraid of him," she said. "I don't like bullies," Elias replied. On the 4th morning, the storm cleared. The sky was bright and cold. Elias stepped outside to check the tree line. More tracks. Not just 3 this time. 5. They had returned during the storm and watched again. Elias crouched in the snow and studied the marks. The horses were heavy, well fed, not tired. Caleb was serious. He walked back inside. "They're not done," he said. Rebecca's hands froze on the cup she was washing. "How many?" "5 now." She took a breath. "And he won't stop until I'm back in chains." Elias looked around the cabin. "They won't attack in daylight," he said. "They'll wait for dark." Rebecca stood straighter. "Then we don't wait," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "We take the fight to him?" She met his eyes. "Yes." The idea hung between them like a spark near dry wood. "Caleb's ranch sits near the lower valley," Rebecca continued. "There's a supply barn at the edge of the property. If that burns, he loses winter feed." Elias studied her carefully. "You want revenge." "I want freedom," she answered. That afternoon, they saddled the horses. The ride down the mountain felt different this time. Rebecca did not sit quiet and hidden. She rode beside Elias, her rifle strapped across her back. They reached the valley near dusk. There's Caleb Turner's ranch stretched wide across frozen fields. The main house stood tall and painted white, with smoke rising from its chimney. The supply barn sat apart from the rest, stacked high with hay. Elias tied his horse in the trees. "You sure?" he asked. Rebecca nodded. They moved through the snow quietly. The ranch hands were inside, keeping warm. Rebecca crept toward the barn. Elias followed. Inside, hay bales rose high to the rafters. Barrels of feed lined the walls. Rebecca pulled a small lantern from her coat. Her hands shook slightly as she struck a match. Elias placed his hand over hers. "No going back after this," he said. She looked at him, eyes steady. There was never going back. She lit the lantern and tipped it into the hay. Flames caught slowly at first, then faster, when they slipped back into the trees as smoke began to rise. By the time the ranch hands noticed, the barn was fully ablaze. Men shouted. Buckets of water were thrown uselessly against roaring fire. Caleb Turner stormed out of the house, coat thrown over his shoulders. Elias watched from the shadows as Caleb stared at the burning barn. Even from a distance, Rebecca could see the fury twist his face. He scanned the tree line as if sensing her presence. Rebecca felt a strange calm settle inside her. "He knows," she whispered. "Yes," Elias said, and charged forward himself. Elias saw him through the smoke, rifle raised. 2 shots rang out at the same time. Elias felt heat slice across his side. He staggered, but stayed standing. Caleb's shoulder exploded red. He dropped his rifle but did not fall. Their eyes locked through the broken doorway. Caleb snarled like a wounded animal. "This ends tonight," he growled. He reached for his pistol. Rebecca stepped beside Elias. She raised her rifle calmly. "You already ended it," she said. She fired. Caleb Turner fell backward into the snow. Silence followed, whilst the remaining riders fled into the trees. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Rebecca walked slowly toward Caleb's body. Snow drifted gently down around him. She stared at the man who had branded her, hunted her, tried to own her. He lay still. No more shouting. No more chains. Elias stepped beside her. "It's done," he said. Rebecca looked up at the dark sky. For the first time since leaving Laramie, her shoulders relaxed. The mountains stood quiet around them. Winter air felt clean again. They dragged the bodies away from the cabin and covered them with snow. There would be questions come spring, but for now, the valley was silent. That night, Rebecca did not cry in her sleep. She climbed down from the loft before dawn and sat beside Elias at the hearth. "Thank you," she said softly. Elias shook his head. You saved yourself." She reached out and touched the scar on her cheek. "I thought this mark meant I was ruined," she said. Elias looked at her. "It means you survived." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the first light of morning touched the snowy peaks. Winter was still strong, but fear was gone. The valley stayed quiet for a week after Caleb Turner fell in the snow. No riders came up the mountain. No torches burned in the dark. The only sounds were wind through pine trees and the slow crack of ice along the creek. But Elias knew peace in the west never lasted long. On the 8th morning, he rode down toward the lower trail to check the old trading post near the fork in the river. He needed flour and salt. Rebecca insisted on coming. "You don't have to ride everywhere with me," he told her. "Yes, I do," she replied. "We face things together now." He did not argue. When they reached the trading post, the old wooden sign creaked in the wind. 2 horses stood tied outside that did not belong there. Elias's jaw tightened. Inside, 3 men stood near the counter speaking in low voices. They wore long dusters and clean boots, not ranch hands, not miners. Lawmen. One of them turned as Elias entered. "You Elias Boon?" the tallest one asked. "That depends who's asking." "Deputy Marshal Warren Cole." He removed his hat slowly. His eyes shifted toward Rebecca. We're here about Caleb Turner. Rebecca's spine stiffened. What about him? Elias asked. He was found dead, Cole said. Shot. Witnesses say you and this woman were seen riding near his property the night his barn burned. Elias did not blink. Witnesses say a lot of things. Cole studied Rebecca's scar. You, Rebecca Hale? Yes. Caleb Turner was your husband. Rebecca's voice did not shake. He forced that marriage. Cole crossed his arms. Maybe so, but he was a powerful man, and powerful men have friends. The room felt tight. You planning to arrest her? Elias asked. That depends, Cole said, on whether she killed him in self-defense. Rebecca stepped forward. He broke into our cabin with 5 armed men, she said clearly. He fired first. I shot back. Cole watched her for a long moment. You got proof? Elias met his eyes. You're welcome to ride up and see the bullet holes in my walls. Cole looked at his 2 deputies. One of them shrugged slightly. Turner had enemies, the deputy muttered. Plenty of them. Cole sighed. Thing is, he said slowly, when a man like Turner dies, folks look for someone to blame. His brother runs cattle south of Cheyenne. He's already asking questions. Rebecca felt cold creep up her spine. Let him ask, she said. Cole leaned closer. He's offering $500 for the woman who killed his brother. Silence fell. Elias's hand rested near his belt. Cole raised both palms slightly. I ain't here to collect that, he said. But bounty hunters might be. Rebecca's eyes hardened. So, what are you saying? I'm saying if you stay up on that mountain. Oh, you better be ready. Men will come. Elias nodded once. We've been ready. Cole placed his hat back on his head. I never liked Turner, he admitted. But the law don't care about feelings. Keep your rifles clean. He stepped aside, letting them leave. The ride back felt heavier than before. Rebecca stared ahead at the rising peaks. It never ends, she said quietly. It changes, Elias replied. That's all. 3 weeks passed. Snow began to soften under early spring sun. The creek cracked and flowed again. Then one afternoon, Rebecca heard it. A single distant gunshot. Elias was checking traps near the ridge. Rebecca grabbed her rifle and ran outside. Another shot echoed. She mounted her horse without thinking and rode toward the sound. Smoke rose faintly near the tree line. She found Elias kneeling behind a fallen log, blood seeping from his left thigh. Across the clearing stood 2 men with rifles, bounty hunters. Elias fired once more, hitting one in the shoulder. The other ducked behind a tree. Rebecca slid off her horse and dropped behind a rock. You all right? She shouted. Still breathing, Elias answered through clenched teeth. The bounty hunter behind the tree yelled out. $500, says she's worth more dead than alive. Rebecca's grip tightened. She moved low and fast through brush, circling wide. The man focused only on Elias. Rebecca came up behind him silently. Turn around, she said coldly. He spun halfway before she struck him across the head with her rifle stock. He collapsed into the snow. The other bounty hunter fled, dragging his wounded arm. When Rebecca ran to Elias, his leg was bleeding badly. She tore fabric from her skirt and pressed it against the wound. You came alone, he muttered. You would have done the same. She helped him back to the cabin slowly. For 2 days, she stayed at his side. She cleaned the wound. She boiled water. She fed him broth. On the second night, as rain tapped against the roof, Elias looked at her from his cot. You could leave, he said quietly. Ride east. Take money from Turner's estate. Start fresh. Rebecca shook her head. I don't want fresh, she said. I want this. He studied her face. The scar no longer looked like damage. It looked like strength. You're sure? He asked. She sat beside him. They tried to sell me with a sack over my head, she said. You were the only one who saw me stand.